Hey, welcome to my tutorial on aquatic lighting and caustic lights underwater and basically how to fake them. So when I was making this mitosis short film a while back, a few years ago, I had to find a cost-effective way to sort of fake caustic light. Now, of course, you can obviously make a water or a glass material that's rippling and shine some light through it and get some real caustics, but it is incredibly hard to render that. It takes forever. It's not very flexible. So I found that faking it is a much better way to do it. So I'm going to show you guys how I did that. So it involves a few steps, involves some textures, some animated light textures, and then just some easy compositing in After Effects just to put a little bit of extra pizzazz on it basically. Okay, so let's get started. So I've imported this model here. You can use whatever model you want. Using this sort of hairy coral model that I made in a previous tutorial on Patreon here. So we'll just be using that to light. And then I'm going to drop down a geo, and we'll just call this sand. Let's put down a grid. Let's make it larger. Let's give it more rows and columns. Let's give it like 100, 100. And then let's put down a mountain, which basically kind of noises it up a bit. And let's increase the element size just to make this kind of ripple a little bit like sandy looking, kind of. Yeah, cool. All right, and then we'll use a UV project to give ourselves UVs. Okay, so that'll be our sandy ground. And then just save that. Great. So let's talk about, well, actually, let me first just put down the RS light dome. I'm just going to put a quick texture on this sand here so we can see what we're doing. So let me just open up the render view. And light dome, let me just turn this down just a bit. Like 0.3, something like that. Okay. Let's go cam 1. Okay, and then so let me just go to my materials. Oh, shit. Got a sand here. I haven't made it yet. I just made the material or named it. And then let me just open up, just quickly make one here. Find my texture. Should be under Mega Scans, Assets, Textures. Just bring this over so you can see what I'm doing. Mega Scans, and I think it's just this like Thai rippled beach sand. So you can use whatever sand you want. I just basically got this off Mega Scan. So let me just hover over here, drag in the albedo, drag in the roughness and the normal. Okay, I'm not even going to use displacement right now. And then let's just take this, throw this on the grid. Wait a second. Okay, so there's my texture. Go back to, set a quick mark to 1 here. Let me just increase the intensity a bit so I can see what I'm doing. And I think this sand texture probably needs to be much, much smaller. So first let's grab these two, make them both raw, because that's what it needs to be. Okay, and then grab all 3 of them and scale, let's go like 5 and 5. Scale it down. Okay, maybe a little more. Let's go 10 and 10. There we go, that's feeling a little better. And let's maybe put this stuff like 5. And the roughness, I don't know. Okay, that looks too wet. Let's go more dry. And then let's take this guy, make it look just a bit lighter like that. Okay, cool. So that's basically all I want. Something basic. I'm not really trying to go too detailed into texturing here. The point of this tutorial is showing you how to do the lighting. Okay, so let's find a nice angle here for now. Let's just park our camera there. And let me take this light dome and turn it off. Okay, and I'm going to put down another RS light. and I'm going to change this to be a spotlight. Okay, and let me come out here. Let me hit enter, flip this guy around so that it's pointing downwards and move it up. Okay, so you can see what it's doing here. Great. Let's just get it like above it there. And then let's make the shadow a little softer. Let's do maybe like that. And the spot, we can play with the cone angle later, the fall off, maybe something like that. Okay, cool. So we've got our light. Great. So how do we make this look like caustics? Okay, well, basically you need to use an animated texture in your light. And you can find caustic textures online. I use Grayscale Gorilla, but actually for when I made this video, the mitosis video, Grayscale Gorilla didn't have any of those like animated gobos. So I just ended up just buying a stock video of some caustics and just using that, saving it as an image sequence. But for the purposes of this video, since I now have it as a Grayscale Gorilla asset, I will just use that. So let's go to wherever you keep your Grayscale Gorilla assets, gobos, and it's this animated gobos basics, and I think it's the number 3 we want. So there's A003 and A004. They look basically the same. So I'll just use 3 for now. So let's just take this guy, go into our spotlight, and I'm going to call this caustic. And we want to come up here to where it says color and use texture. And then it obviously turns off because we don't have a texture. We have to come to this texture tab, and right where it says file name, we can just drag in our caustic texture. And there you go. So you can see in the little viewport thing here that it is working. Okay. And let's change the color space to raw, because it should be, so any black and white image should basically just be raw like that. And we have control. We can, just like a regular texture, we can scale it down, we can scale it up. I like making it a little larger, but depending on the scale of your scene or how close your camera is, you may want it smaller. Okay, the other thing we can do is we can go to adjust, and we can change the color. So the color multiplier, we can make it yellow, we can make it blue, whatever. So I'm going to make it sort of like a kind of a tinted blue, but then kind of go back towards the white a bit. Okay, cool. And then we can come into the general tab, and you can adjust the gamma. So if you go like this, it basically makes the darker parts darker and the lighter parts lighter. And if you go like this, it makes the darker parts lighter. So I want to really just kind of crush this so that we really only have the light parts. And then I can go into my light and I can increase the intensity or the exposure, either one, and really just crank this up. So you have these nice, really visible caustic highlights on this model. Okay. Now that's cool, but this doesn't animate. So if I move this texture is not animating, even though I have an entire sequence of them here. It's only using this first one. So what you can do is if you come up to the texture where it says 000, you can change this to $F3. So the reason you want to have it, if you don't know, $F is just a little script basically just saying use the frame number as a number. So basically on frame 3, it's going to be the 3rd one. On frame 4, it's going to be the 4th image. On frame 5, it's going to be the 5th image. But the reason we're putting a 3 after it is because if you look at this image here, you see how it says 000 and then 001, 002. It's because there are 3 digits right there at the end. If it was like 0004, 0005 with 4 digits, you would put $F4. And if it was only 2 digits, you'd put $F2. Okay, so now that we do that, now if we scrub through, let me just reset this here, because this might be doing something weird. Y. Interesting. Ah, there we go. Okay. For some reason it messed up. But you can see if I kind of scrub through that it is animating. Now, the only problem with this is if you look at my image sequence here, there are 179 images in the sequence. So if my scene is only 179 frames long, great, that's totally fine. But if it goes longer than that, it's not gonna loop. So let me go up here to 167, 170, then as soon as I go past it, it goes dark because it'll only read up to frame 179 because that's how many frames there are. So how do we get it to loop? So this is the one thing that I dislike about Houdini, because in Cinema 4D, there would just be a little checkbox right here that just says looping texture, and it just automatically figures out how to loop it. In Houdini, you have to write a little stupid script, but it's not that hard. It's really, really easy. I'll show you how to do it. That's why I'm making this tutorial, so you can easily refer back to it anytime you want. So thank you to this like VFXarabia.com for basically telling me exactly how to do it. So there's this really nice little article here that kind of shows you what to do with textures, how to make them loop, how to hold them, how to offset them. So I just basically copied this. So we're going to use this pad 0 function basically. So basically all you have to do is where it says $F3 up here, you just replace it with this thing right here, this backtick pad 0, and then you type the number that corresponds with how many digits your number is. So in our case, it's 3 because we had our texture image ends with 3 digits. And then you put $F %, and then how many frames there are. Okay, so we're gonna just copy this here. And we're gonna come up here and we're gonna paste it right there. Okay, now we need to change this though, because ours it's not a 4-digit number, it's a 3-digit number. And we don't have 251 frames, we have, I believe, 179. Now the trick here though is, this is one little gotcha. If your frame starts counting from 1, then you can just, whatever the end frame is, you can just leave it as that. But if it starts counting from 0, you have to remember that there are not 179 frames, there are actually 180 because 0 isn't being counted in that. So you have to actually just add one here. So we'll go $F 180. Okay, let's just refresh this. And for whatever reason, when I refresh it, it throws an error, and then you just have to kind of like move this again, and then it's fine. So it must be some little bug. But if you just grab the little handle of your spotlight and kind of jiggle it, it all comes back to life. So now when I scrub through, it's totally working. And if I go past 179, it just loops back to the beginning. So problem solved. Pad 0 is your friend. Super easy. It works really well. Okay, so that is how we get the caustics. Now, this isn't the deep sea. I wanted my image to look like it was kind of in this shallow tropical coral reef. So I want to have some ambient light. So let me turn this back on and let's change the color to like this sort of greenish blue. But then let's just move this like way, way down. Let's put it to like 0.1. Just kind of give it some fill. Just a bit. And maybe let's make it more blue, more white. Maybe make the intensity a little more. So, cool. I don't want to overpower the caustics because I want the caustics to be apparent. And then the other thing is the caustics are only happening right within this circle of the spotlight. So I need to come into the light, go down to the spot with the cone angle, and bump it way out so that it covers the whole thing. But what that's doing is it's expanding the size of my texture, and I don't want that, so I have to go back to the texture, and we're going to scale this down again. But now the caustics are covering the entire sea floor. Okay. Something else I can do, if you want, is let's go into the light dome, let's go to contribution, and let's turn off the volume contribution, because I only want the volume contribution for the caustics. And then if I go over to my out context, and I go to Redshift, Advanced, Volume Scattering, and hit Enable, I'm going to have volume. So you can kind of see these light rays here. So let's go back into the camera and kind of pull out a bit so you can see. You can see these light rays. So that kind of adds a little extra. So when it's animated, you'll see that they'll all move, and it makes it feel like it's more underwater. And I can kind of adjust that here. I can increase the scattering. I can tint the scattering to be blue. I like this sort of fake tropical greenish blue like that. Maybe something like that. I can adjust the anisotropy so that it kind of removes some of them. You can kind of play around with these sliders and make it darker. I'm gonna make it like this. So if you go left, it makes it, I think, away from the camera, and if you go right, it makes it closer to the camera, something like that. But I like this look here. Okay, and then let me just find a nice angle here. Get in nice and close. So I'm just going to find and I realized that my coral looks like garbage because I don't have subdivisions on right now, but that's intentional just for the viewport performance. So let's just get in close like here. And actually I'm going to take my camera and I'm going to flatten this out a bit. So I'm going to go Redshift camera or view and go from the focal length of 50 to like 100. And then that's like way too close. Let's get it like this. So I get just some distance in there. Okay, cool. So I've got my angle set up. Let me go to my coral, enable tessellation. That'll make it all smooth. And I'm just going to render out a frame of this basically, and we're going to take it into After Effects. I'm going to show you what I did to make this really feel like it's underwater and there's a little more depth and everything. So let me just RS Material Builder. Let's just call this Coral. Oops. Ah, it's crashing. No. Okay, so I've made this texture here called Coral. I'm just going to quickly assign some stuff to it. So RS point attribute. I covered how to texture this in the previous tutorial where I showed how to make this coral. So let's just put this here. It's going to be curve U. Let's put a ramp. This isn't doing anything because I've got the viewport, the render view disabled because sometimes when you try to make live updates with this tessellation on, it crashes a bunch, and I'm just kind of picking some random colors, so who cares? So something like that. And then I just turn on some basic sheen, something like that. And let's see what we get. Fire this up. Anytime. 1, 2, 3, go. Ready, set, go. Oh my God, why is this taking so long? Redshift, hurry the fuck up. Okay, cool, so we've got that. Great, let's call that good. Okay, so just for the purposes of this, that's a fine texture. Just trying to show you how to do the lighting. And actually, I might want to bump up the lighting. I want this to be even more intense. So let's take the light and let's make the exposure. Ah, it's crashing, Jesus Christ. All right, fucking bitch. Okay, back. I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna take the coral, I'm gonna disable tessellation. so I can make live updates. Oh, Redshift. Sometimes you piss me off. Okay, so I'm going to take this caustic light and I want to increase the exposure, something like that. And now I need to probably decrease the scattering amount. Something like that. Okay, and then in my camera, I also like to go to Redshift camera, color correction, and enable tone mapping. That way it kind of makes these highlights that are blown out, not blown out. Okay, cool. So what I'm gonna do in my Redshift render wrap, there's a few things I'm gonna need. So if you notice, I'm not using depth of field, and I'm doing that on purpose. Even though I'm really close and depth of field would look really nice on here, having some shallow depth of field, I'm gonna do that in After Effects with a plugin. And the reason I don't want depth of field here is because I'm gonna be comping in a background, and if you have shallow depth of field, it makes it really hard to do this trick that I'm gonna show you in After Effects. So leave it off for now. So what we wanna do is come to Output, AOV Manager, and we wanna add a couple of AOVs. So the first one we want is, crap, where'd you go? We want the crypto mat, and I want to leave it as an EXR. And then I also want the Z depth also as an EXR. One thing I want to do, Houdini's scale is set, like if you're coming from Cinema 4D and you like to make a Z depth AOV, it just comes out perfectly every time. But Houdini is like, it's minimum and max depth are like insane, and it makes it kind of hard to work with in After Effects. So I like to set this a little lower. So the max depth, maybe instead of 500 units, let's do like, I don't know, 50, something like that. See how that works. And if we need to re-render it, it's fine. I'm just gonna try 50. Post effects, make sure that you have this, and this checked. That way it'll render out exactly like what you see in your render viewer. Cool. And then I like to do PNGs, 16-bit. Make sure you change this to PNG. And then I'll do render it to my job folder. Render, let's do $OS to, oh crap, $OS to put it in a folder with the name of this thing. We'll call it Coral Lighting. And then we'll do, great, so they'll do another folder, $AOV, and then we want $OS.$AOV. So putting those little tokens in there basically is gonna name it. So it's gonna have a folder within my render folder that is the same name as this, so Coral Lighting. Then it's gonna have another folder within that and it's gonna separate out each of my AOVs, and then it'll have hip name, this name again, and then the AOV name in the name of the actual file itself. It's a handy little trick if you don't know how to do that. Okay, so I'm gonna render out a couple of frames of this, and for now, I'm just gonna leave the render settings at, I'm just gonna do, where are we at? Just gonna leave it at automatic, and yeah, because I don't really need it to be anything special. I'm just gonna show you how to do this in After Effects. So I'll pause it here and render. Okay, so we're here in After Effects with our rendered frames, however many frames you have. So, cool. So the first thing I want to do is I want to use my Z-Pass to create some depth of field here. So I'm going to be using a plugin, and I'll show you what that is in a second. So first, let's take our Z EXR and drag it in. It's going to come in black, and we're going to put a something called an extractor on it. And in the extractor, you just go to Layers, Z, and now it's white. But you have this black point and white point, and you can kind of adjust these here to get it to where you want it to be. So basically, what we want this to do, this is going to be our map for where our depth of field is. So I want to pinch it so that the white in the background is like the farthest most object in my scene should be like almost white. So like something like that is pretty good. And then I want the front part to be like just barely black, like that. Okay, cool. Now I want to invert it because it needs to be inverted for this to work. And then I want to put a FL, it's called Frischluft depth of field and Frischluft out of focus. So let me just pull that up. Let me see. Frischluft depth of field. Yeah, frischluft.com. It's this plugin called depth of field and out of focus. So it's for After Effects. You can get it. I highly recommend it. I use it all the time in After Effects. It saves a lot of time from having to render depth of field out in 3D. You can just do it in post in After Effects. It's not perfect when you need like an extreme close-up with super shallow depth of field. It's better to do it in 3D. But for me, it helps for compositing, especially in situations like this. And I'll show you why in a moment. So the first thing we want to do is, so we go invert, and then we go FL out of focus. And then we want to put a vector blur on there as well. So the out of focus, we want to put, let's do like 2.8, something like that. So that just kind of defocuses this whole thing. So here's 0, let's do 2.8. You can kind of see it blurs it. And then the vector blur, for the amount, I want to put -4. So basically that sort of like expands. So if you do 0, it almost like expands outwards a bit. Okay, cool. So we've got that. Now what we need to do is take this Z and pre-compose it. I'm just going to call it DOF matte and move all attributes into the new composition. Okay, now we can turn this off. We don't need that. That's just our matte. Now create a new adjustment layer and put our FL depth of field, not the out of focus. Okay, so what we're going to do now is for the depth layer, we're going to use our DOF matte. And then let's just adjust the radius. Let's put like 10. All right, let's do it so we can really see it. Let's do like 50. So that makes it super blurry. But then if you take this focal point, you can just click, and wherever you click that's where your focus is going to be. So it's not perfect. It's not quite as great as the depth of field. Like if you do it super shallow like this, it definitely looks better in 3D. But this way it helps you composite, because sometimes when you want to put like stuff behind here, you need these really crisp edges for your crypto matte to be able to like layer things in there. And if you have these blurry edges, it makes it really hard to composite stuff behind there. Something else we can do is on our, let me just name this DOF. On highlight selection, you want to hit enable, and you'll notice that these background highlights where they'll sort of kind of blow out and give you some little bokeh there, and you can adjust that. You can change the facets to like 5. You have control. You can make them like hexagons. I can increase the highlight intensity here, so you have some control over everything. It's kind of nice. Okay, so let me just reduce this a bit. Let's do this like 25. Let's go like half of that, and let's put the focus. Yeah, here. The other nice thing about this is you can animate this. So if you want to animate your depth of field in post, you can just, put a keyframe here and then come out 8 seconds and drag this back here, and then suddenly you have an animated depth of field, which is nice. Oops, I forgot to drop another keyframe back here. Well, whatever. So, okay. Let me just come back here. Great, we've got that. Okay, so we've got our depth of field. So why am I doing it in post like this? So the reason is because I want to comp in some like fake foggy background layer. So let me just put in a solid color fill. Let's do like something like this. I don't know, like almost greenish blue. Cool. And then let me bring in, let me use my Z pass again. Come on. Extractor, Z, and then we'll just bring this back out like that. Okay, something like that. And we'll use this as a Luma mat for this guy. So we'll just go Z, change this to Luma. So that way I have some control with the Z pass. I can kind of adjust the black points and the white points here. So I can make it look kind of murky. It's kind of touchy here. That's why let's do like 4.3, 4.5, something like that. 4.8. Let's do 3.6 here. Okay, so that way it's kind of fading, and then you could put the DOF on top of that, and there you go. So it kind of looks like you have this, and you can adjust the transparency of this to kind of make it. So that way it feels like it's, so this is the original without that, and then you kind of put this in there, it feels like it's in this sort of murky underwater space. That's basically it. I mean, I might want to put a little, put a LUT on there, put some Lumetri color, creative, let's just, I don't know, just put something, or put some contrast on there, I don't know. Let me try blue steel. I don't know, just kind of flip through these till you find something you like, or just kind of put some contrast in there to bring out the shadows and highlights. But that's basically it. And then obviously if you rendered out a sequence of this, these caustic lights would animate. But that's kind of how I got that effect. This sort of like, obviously it's not realistic, and I wasn't trying to be realistic with it with my mitosis film. I kind of wanted this like hyper real, super colorful background, but that's how I did it, is just rendering it out without depth of field. I used this Frischluft plugin to help me get depth of field in After Effects, and then I composited it in this sort of blue background fog-ish stuff using the Z layer. One thing I actually forgot is to show you a little extra trick for something just to kind of go above and beyond on this lighting thing. So this effect here that you can see, if you can kind of look at the light on the ground there, you can see sort of this like chromatic aberration there. And the way that I did that is, I'll show you in After Effects. So if you come into After Effects and you take your image sequence, so whatever gobo you're using for, so let's do this here. Let's just bring this Caustics thing in here. So there we have it. And basically I want to put a, I think it's called channel, let's see, select, I think it's select channel, set channels, that's it. Okay, so you put this set channels on your layer here, and you set the red source to red, the green source to off, and the blue source also to off. So you're basically only turning on red. Then duplicate your layer, change red to off, and set green to green. And then duplicate your layer again, set green to off, and set blue source to blue. So that way you're basically isolating the channels. You've got your blue, your green, and your red. And then what you need to do is take the top two and set the blend mode to add. That basically gets you back to exactly where you just were. But if you take any one of these layers and just move it by like a couple pixels, and you can just get this nice offset. So that's not the layer I want. Let's try this one. So that's kind of cool, but that's not the layer I want. The bottom one, then it gives you this blue and red offset. So if you just move it, shit, what did I just do? If you just move it a couple pixels, then you get what you want. You can also just hit S and scale it up. So it kind of comes out on all sides or just near the edges. But I like to do, let's just move it like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe like 8, something like that. So now you have this sort of chromatic aberration built into it. So then what you would do is you would just render out, instead of an MP4, you would just render out like a JPEG sequence again, essentially. And then you just use that in your texture, in your light texture like I showed you before. And then all of a sudden you're gonna have these nice little chromatic aberrations cast on the ground. And then when you use volumetrics, you also get colored volumetric rays as well. So you get these little red and blue volumetric rays. So it's just a little extra something you can do to kind of make it feel a little more realistic. Because if you actually look, if you're ever like in a pool or underwater and you look at the caustics, they all have this little bit of chromatic aberration, and it's just something you can do to make it feel a little bit more realistic. Cool. Well, I hope this helps, and thanks.